have already might have read the document, might have attended number of seminars, conferences related to NEP 2020, and you might have made your own understandings about that. Now, since it is a orientation on NEP 2020, it is there. In this, I will be focusing entirely on the concept of student diversity and the inclusive education that has been articulated in NEP 2020. And we'll try to reflect on that, what the policy is hinting at and trying to suggest us, and how we are visualizing it and how we are supposed to implement it, and what are the changes over a period of time that is likely to come into this school education sector and also higher education sector, and how we need to be equipping ourselves to meet those challenges and prepare the students in the desired manner. So it is in that context my presentation will be there. So if you have not read the document on NEP 2020, it is a 62-page document. So you can download it from the Ministry of Education website and you can read them. It is also available in the local languages, the approved scheduled languages of Constitution of India. You can read them. Okay. So let us start with that. As you know that this NEP 2020 policy document is a 66 pages document. This has been classified into 4 parts, and each part is being given a theme but different titles, like school education is part 1. Within that school education, there are 8 chapters or sections you may consider. There are 8 different aspects of the school educations have been discussed. Similarly, in part 2, the policy is focusing on higher education, and these details are given from chapter 9 to 19 chapters, and there it has dealt in differently in different headings that you can browse through and you can get an idea about it. Then part 3 talks about other key areas of focus. So that is how the school education and higher education has to work in continuum and try to address the issues and challenges the student faces school education and how they are going to be accommodated. And other areas are common areas which are likely to be seen in school education as well as in higher education, like adult education, vocational education, and some other areas which are common to both the school and higher education. And the part 4 talks about how does it happen. So that is a process of implementation, how this has to be implemented and how the vision and the mission of this policy 2020 needs to be addressed. So it is these details are given in these 4 headings and the themes. And the details of the school education, as the first slide showed, it has got 8 chapters. 8 chapters are dealing with different headings, different themes that are there. The first title, the chapter talks about early child education and care and education, which is the foundation of learning. So which is the starting point for school education, how it must look like, and what are the concerns and causes that we need to address are given in that. Chapter 2 talks about foundational literacy and numeracy, how this education at the early child care level itself needs to be given and what is its importance and how it needs to be harnessed at the next levels can be looked into. The chapter 3 talks about access and retention of child at all levels. So that is no dropout in between when the school child joins at this particular stage of any particular point of time. If he joins school, he has to leave only at the end of the schooling period. Then what is the curriculum and pedagogy in schools? How is that changes that is envisaged by the policy brings curricular changes, and with that curricular changes, how the pedagogical changes has to be brought in and how teacher needs to adopt those and implement it in the classroom is also one of the important aspect. That chapter speaks about it. And the 5th chapter talks about the role of teachers, the essence of teachers in the school education sectors, and how the teacher must be there, what are their educational qualification, what should be their mode of operations, and other things are discussed in chapter 5 under the heading teachers. And the chapter 6 talks about equitable and inclusive education, learning for all. So where we give more emphasis on equality, not the equity. And by giving equality also, how do we say that we are going towards achieving the inclusive educational ideas and conventions? And how do we ensure that learning or education is for all? That theme vision has to be attained, and how is that needs to be looked at. So my discussion is focused on chapter 6. That is what we are going to deal in depth. And chapter 7 talks about convergence through school complexes and clusters and how this inclusions can happen. What are the other alternative mode that can be seen if facilities are not available in an individual school? How this can be explored in neighborhood school, that is talked about in chapter 7. And chapter 8 talks about standard setting and accreditation for school education. So you might be aware that higher education, colleges, universities are going for NAC accreditations. The same quality assurance through accreditations has to be brought into the school education setup also. How do we do that? How do we set the standards, and which is that body that needs to be created and given the school accreditation criteria? So it is in that way the part 1 talks about school education. Now, since fine. Okay, I think I have missed the other slide. There are higher education also. There are 9 to 19 chapters are there. Even in that, chapter number 14 talks about equity and inclusive education at the higher education level. So I will be addressing that also in this particular session, how inclusive education has to be seen at the higher educational institutions. So as you know that the diversity, the word that we are talking about, can be seen from multiple dimensions and has its own interpretation from that particular subject background. Now, some of them are listed out here. So, the first state is saying that it is the state of being diverse. So, that means we are not, no two, though we are human beings together, no two of us are alike, except we have identical twins. Otherwise, by appearance or in some other factors, even identical twins also differs. So that means there is a differentiation among every entity that is existing in this universe. So that is what is being said about diverse. So being different from others, being different from the group, being different from the normal patterns is what the diverse means. And another definition talks is it is defined as condition comprising several distinct elements. So that means it is diversity is not seen only from one factor or one dimension, one parameter. There may be several factors which you may consider it as elements, and each of those elements contribute for the differentiations or the distinctions. So that means diversity has n number of elements into that. So from biological perspective, if you want to see, it is can be seen as the extent of variation of living things found in a specific ecosystem. So that means ecosystem is existing in a natural environment along with all living and other species around us. So it is including the plant and animals, we have to exist along with them in a normal, harmonious way. So it is talking about specific ecosystem. So that means here in that particular region, how the ecosystem is existing, we need to accommodate, adjust to that and try to live along with that. If that is the case, then they call it as a diversity. Other thing is the fact of there being many different things existing together in a group. So that means there are many factors that are there in a group. For example, you may consider your own classroom, whichever subject, college background you are there. In your own class, if you look at that, the students are there for pursuing a particular discipline, but they are of different background, maybe from different social background, maybe having different religious background, having different abilities in terms of their thinking process or doing factors. Okay, there may be difference in their cultural aspects. Like this, we find, though they are there in as a one single group, but I find varieties of differences that may be there in my class. If that is there, I may consider that as a diversified group. Then the fact of many different types of things are people being included in something or a range of diversity of things and people. So that means here diversity can be seen as not a single point. It can be seen across a spectrum with a range, with a bandwidth. We can see the different elements falling in that particular dimension. So with this is the meanings that we have for the term or the idea of concept of diversity from different dimensions. So with that understanding of this concept, we need to read the document and try to see in what context the term is used and how it has to be visualized in our school context or in our higher educational context. Next, when you look at the student diversity as such, so that was the earlier one was the diversity in general. Now we come to student diversity. So it is a diversity that we want to see in the learner or the learner that he brings with himself to the classroom or to the institution. All those things we call it as students diversity. And in our conditions, we can see the student diversity in terms of race, from which race they are, which ethnicity, ethnographic conditions they have come from, what is their sexual orientation, that is in terms of gender, male or female, and socioeconomic status, whether they are from high, low, or moderate group of SCS status. And we vary in terms of age. Okay, though we are of same age, but we may vary in terms of days and months. So there are we differ from physical abilities, religious abilities, political belief, or other ideologies that we follow in life. So these are the various dimensions of diversity that we need to look in this when we come to the student community. Now, apart from all these factors, there are other factors also as diversity that we are likely to see in our class. One is the linguistic diversity. So that is the language spoken by the learners or the students at home. So there may be different language that they learn as their mother tongue. So the medium language is a different variation. So we may be deliberating only in English medium or Hindi medium or any other regional language medium. Even that language also becomes a one kind of diversity, and one can harness that and use it very extensively. Next is the social cultural diversity. So if the languages are different, people are coming from different language means they are coming from different society, different community, and with that they bring in their own socio-cultural factors into the classroom discussions, and therefore even that also adds to the diversity factors. Then the diversity of the based on economics, which is a part of your ACS conditions, and your sexual orientation is seen in terms gender diversity. So we see gender diversity not just as male and female, even we need to consider transgender as the third factor of gender, and we need to address them more meaningfully when such kind of students are there in the class. Next is, what are the diversity we try to see among the learners in their terms of learning? Because we know that learning is a process and each learner learns it according to his own abilities, and they learn it in their own ways and styles. What are those styles? That we need to understand and visualize that. So these are the diversities in the learning that we can observe, notice in our own classroom when we are dealing with them. The first one is their learning styles. The styles means here the predominant use of the sense organs, which they use extensively for making their learning. Okay, we know that learning is done through using our sense organs, and which sense organ is predominantly used in the learning process decides what kind of styles I or learner have. Okay, so that decides it. So adult learners means those learners who are using the listening skills to the larger extent and make use of it for learning benefits to the larger extent. If that is the case, then we say they are adult learners. They have this listening as the main source for learning. So that is their learning styles. Okay, next comes the visual learners, where they need to see the things that we are describing through our verbal descriptions. So they bring in, they listen, as well as they develop the skill of keen observation. So vision and hearing, both of them are brought into action when learning is happening. So they become the visual learners. So apart from listening, they want some visual clues to make their meaning better and comprehensive in a better manner. So it is that kind of learners. We call them as visual. And the third kind of learner is they say, I can listen, I also see, but I need to touch them. I need to feel them. So it is only possible when you can give a model to them, a physical model or a working model, which enables them to understand how each process of that is happening. So that means here they are using their hearing, vision, as well as their skin, tactile sense activity into the learning process. So learning, active learning means you have to use your sense organs actively in the process. So how many kinds of sense organs you are going to bring into play, it is the style that we adopt. So it is these kinds of styles, these kinds of learners are there. So some may be agile, some may be visual, some may be tactile. So these all the three needs to be addressed by the same teacher. So that means here the teacher must go to the classroom with the learning resources and choose the learning resources which caters to the needs of all these three kinds of learners in the classroom. So it is better if it is there, if these are the situations. If you take a model, a dummy model or a working model to the class, then that will facilitate very extensively for all these three kinds of learners and their learning styles. Next, there is a rate of learning. How do they learn? Do all of them learn in the same rate? No, they don't learn. So we have different kinds of learners based on the time they take to learn. So based on the time that you decide, so we can classify them as slow learners, average learners, and fast learners. Okay, slow learners require more time, some more time, additional time is required. So don't take them as they are something else, they are doing something else. So they require more time for assimilation and making meaning out of the learning activity. So it is in that way, rate of learning also diversity is there. And then participation in learning. So when you call them to do that activity, you may say that some of them are actively, voluntarily come forward, and some doesn't come voluntarily, and you need to force them, and they need to come for doing that. So it is involuntary learning. So we call them as active learners and passive learners. So their involvement in the learning process is also a one factor which makes it diversity. And then kinds of learning methods one adopts in learning them. So we use varieties of learning method teacher can adopt. It is available to them, to us. And whichever we try to do it, some may facilitate them, some may not enhance their learning abilities. So we use varieties of them, or we may use of them in combination also in the classroom. So this can happen. Like inductive is for helping them to understand from what they know to what is unknown. So trying to make them to create the knowledge. For creating knowledge, induction is better. And if you want them to use the already established knowledge to particular context, then deduction is important. It can be used very extensively, precisely. And if you want them to solve any given contextual problems to be solved using either inductive, deductive, or discovery approach, they can use the problem solving method and try to find the solutions. So it is in that way, learning methods are also different, styles are also different, paces are also different. So when they do it in that way, then we need to see how do I assess them? Can I use the same pattern that I can do it there? No, I need to look at their different needs and different styles and different parts of paces of that. And accordingly, I need to adopt the different procedures of assessment, which are broadly classified as oral assessment procedures, written assessment procedures, or performance-based assessment procedures. So teacher has the freedom to do those kinds of activities, and you can see that these diversities exist in the classroom, and the teacher exercises all of them and try to use those techniques and strategies which benefit to the larger group and try to meet the needs of every learner in the class. Now, the policy to address these kinds of issues are the diversities that are there and to bring them everyone into the classroom fold, everyone to be treated equally. The policy talks about what is known as SEDG, which is socially, economically disadvantaged groups of people. So inclusive means we may be having the notion that inclusive education means bringing the disabled students and making to sit with the normal student is inclusion. So it is only if you are trying to do that as a practice and if you are doing it, it is only a physical inclusion, but it's not a total inclusion. So we need to look at how do I bring it that total inclusions in my classroom factors in the education scenario. So they classified and they have defined the inclusion in terms of SEDG, that is socio-economically disadvantaged groups of people are to be considered under the inclusive category of learners. It is not only disabled, so it is more than that. What are those this SCGD talks about? So it is categorized. The SCGD means we have to consider them in terms of broadly categorized based on their identities. Which is that identities? That is their sexual orientation that we have. So that is particularly female, male, transgender individuals that we are talking about, that we see in our classroom conditions, we need to consider them. So that is gender is also one of the factor that we need to consider for inclusion. Second factor is social cultural identities. So the policy defines social cultural identities in terms of these sections of the people who live in the society. They are scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, other backward caste, minorities. They are there in the society. All of them needs to be accommodated and they are treated as socio-cultural entities. The next one is the geographical entities. That means where these kinds of people live. Their geographical population density is to be looked at and we need to address that. Whether they are living in village or in small towns or in any cosmopolitan metropolitan cities or it is in the capital cities or district headquarters, all these factors also makes a difference and we need to look at how those differences needs to be addressed. And now the policy, apart from all these geographical differences, it also talks about aspirational districts. Most major focus is given on aspirational district. So these are the districts created by the Ministry of Education looking into the educational status of the states. Educational levels of each states have been considered and each state, as we know, that have a right number of districts within them and they have analyzed the district-wise educational progress of the children and wherever they found it is very, very low or very backward compared to the national average or compared to the state average performances, if they are listed at the bottom of the table, they are treated as aspirational districts so that deliberate interventions are given so that over a period of time, they are also empowered to come to the mainstream and be in the next higher positions. So it is in that way they have labeled it aspirational districts. And these aspirational districts are prevailing across the country. There are 543 districts which has been highlighted. In Karnataka, it is Raichur and it is Yadgir. These are the two districts are there. So even in your own states, there may be one or two districts which have been highlighted and been listed under that. And you can see that there are varieties of activities that happens in the aspirational districts. Number of departments come together, they synergize and try to facilitate the education in whatever manner each department could able to do that. Say, for example, if school doesn't have electricity, then electricity department comes in and they give the electric facility connections to the school. If drinking water is not there, the water management department comes and they provide water tap system to the school. Okay, if the buildings are not there, then CPWD or PWD department comes, constructs and provides facilities to school. Let's see, like this, all the concerned departments which are related to the school education sector, they come, converge, and they work towards to attain their goals. So it is over a period of time, these districts should also progress and come to the average, state average levels and try to proceed in that way. So it is in that way the government thinks that no state, no district should be left behind because of their various back reasons and other things. Their constant efforts must be made to bring them to the next higher level standards. So it is in that way they have labeled it as aspirational districts. Then if you consider the disabilities, so when you think about the disabilities, then we have to refer to RPWD Act, so which we'll be talking about in the next few slides. So where the rights of persons with disability acts list 21 disabilities that they have been listed. And then how do we address them meaningfully in our classroom conditions? And among all those disabilities, so since we are dealing with the learning in school and higher educational levels, so we have to address the learning disabilities as the one of the important components of the disabilities, and how do we address them? And similarly, socioeconomic conditions. So in these socioeconomic conditions, we might be seeing people migrating from one state to another state due to various reasons. So migrant communities are there, low income households are there, vulnerable sections of the societies are there, victims of the children of traffickings are there, orphans are there. So urban and rural area poor are there. So all these things contributes to the socioeconomic conditions. So the SEDG takes care of all these components and try to see them in a broader spectrum, and all of them constitute to the major ideology of inclusiveness. Okay, if all these factors are not addressed, only one factor of bringing the disabled into a normal classroom and making them to sit doesn't entitle itself to be called as inclusive in any manner. So that is the understanding each one of us should have and develop. Next, the policy. As I said, this NEP in the chapter 6 under school education talks about equitable and inclusive education, learning for all. It is the title of this chapter where it delves depth into what is that, what are the components as the teacher or a teacher educator or an administrator, how we have to look into them and how do we address them. So it is in this perspective, there are 14 to 15 points that are being given in this section, and each one has to be read comprehensively and to be interpreted in a more practical ways. One is, so the inclusiveness, equity, they believe that, the policy believes that education is the single greatest tool for achieving social justice and equality. Okay, it is only through education only we can achieve social justice and equality. And these two terms, social justice and equality, is the preamble of our Constitution of India. So we should try to achieve them. How do we do that? So the policy is emphasizing that it cannot do by any other means. It is only can be done only in the form of providing education to them. So therefore, the school education that we are going to provide, it must be provided to everyone, not created for only some or some sections of the society. It should be made available to all. So because of that, RT Act has been saying that education up from the age of earlier from 4 to 16, now with the new introduction of school reforms, so we say that now from 3 to 18 years, the school education is compulsory and mandatory for every child of the country. And the school should not deny any admission based on any one of those factors, caste, creed, religion, and these factors, as we are knowing, they should not be there. So only by practicing that, putting into action to a certain extent, we can ensure that social justice and equality are maintained in the school. Okay, so it is in that way they are saying how education becomes important and how education creates an inclusive society, and through that how we can prepare an inclusive minded human beings and citizens of the country. So it is in that way they are giving importance to education and inclusive education. Okay, the next point it talks about the critical problems and recommendation regarding early child education. So you know that the policy has reformed the school education sector. The school structure has been changed. It has been changed to 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 pattern. The 5 years of early child education, okay, 3 years of preparatory, 3 years of middle stage, and 4 years of secondary stage. So that means our school education has been reformed, refined, okay, systemic reform. We call that as systemic reform. So now, in the future days to come, every school will have the early child care education. So that what we are practicing in many of the states as nursery or kindergarten, even that will come. And in many states, we have balvatikas or anganwadis that are functioning independently. So all of them, anganwadis, kindergartens, must come in existence in the general school setup, which we are running from class 1 to 10 or 1 to 12. If they are existing, then now the new policy says that from Anganwadi to plus 2 level, everything must be happening in the same school compound only. So there should not be any separate segment sectors that are there. So we need to create them and you need to bring in. So now the concept now bringing them to the school, okay, they are functioning independently and they have been run by the different departments. Now they have to be brought into the education fold and all the facilities needs to be streamlined and need to be channelized. So how this is going to be done? So the early child education is very, very crucial and it is the foundational level from which if the education is very strong, then the child can proceed very smoothly in the education continue. It is in that factor, this early child education has been emphasized and it is made mandatory for every school to be start doing with this. So if the school addresses a CDG in the beginning, then we can say the child from the beginning itself is inducted into school system, is likely to continue the schooling and try to get all the essential knowledge and competencies that has been enshrined for him to learn in the school activity. The next, it talks about various successful policies and schemes which have been earlier there. Okay, so prior to NEP 2020, we had a national education policy in 1968, then national education policy in 1986. So these are the two policies we had earlier. So whatever those policies were highlighting, which are the best practices that was there, which have been used and which they think they are given the positive results, this needs to be continued. The policy is stressing on that. So it doesn't say that you forget it, new thing, whatever we are suggesting you do it. No, whatever was there earlier, also the strong points, the good benefit that needs to be continued. And if they continue fully, then you can see that there is a smooth transition. And if it is not been considered, it has to be considered very consciously in the present context. So it is in that way the successful policies and scheme must be significantly strengthened. Okay, whatever was you think has given me the positive result, that needs to be continued across the country. So that is what this present policy also talks about. Then at 6.5, it talks about it will also be essential to take into account research that ascertains which measures are effective for certain SEDGs. So that means you cannot implement various programs and schemes for socially economic disadvantaged group of people without conducting a research activity on that particular group. So research is done to have a empirical evidence what you are going to do and what things are happening and how this can be addressed. So without carrying out the research without getting the insight from your research studies, you need not or you should not try to do any other measures. So you should have basic understandings of the ground realities and then try to put them into action. So that is what this policy is ascertaining. So like it has also quoted in the policy that there are examples like providing bicycles, organizing cycling and walking groups to provide access. All these things have shown that these activities have enhanced the school enrollment ratio. And you can see that there are many girls who are deprived of or having no transportations to travel from home to school. They were finding difficulty to reach, they get access to the schools. So with the help of cycles, now they are able to pedalate and come to the school, and they are now having access to education. So it has given a positive result, means these kinds of activities needs to be continued. Okay, so it is in that perspective the policy says that, so we need to do the research, try to understand how when it is implemented, what changes it is going to bring, and study that scheme even after its implementation, and have a evaluative research on those things. And if it is giving the desired result, may be continued. If not, the programs can be terminated. So it is in that way the policy insists that you cannot just bring in some scheme to please some sections of the society. You need to have solid evidences, research evidences, which supports your actions. Then one-on-one teachers, tutors, peer tutoring, opening school, appropriate infrastructure, technological interventions to ensure access can be particularly effective for certain citizens which are there, okay, for certain disabilities. Now, when you come to inclusive education, now you may require a teachers who can give additional attention, take care of the child who are coming under the disability category. In such cases, the teachers can adopt the strategies that the policy is suggesting, that you can have one-on-one teachers. So that means one individual student with a specific special need. For him, a teacher can address and try to do individualized or direct the instruction strategies, and he can do that. And he can also take the help of others who can act as tutors, or you can take the help of your own students in the same class, ask them to do the peer tutoring. Or if there are alternative schoolings are there, open schooling is there, and if the appropriate infrastructures you need to provide. So like this, you need to look at how things can be made accommodative in your own classroom. And apart from that, we also know that there are varieties of technological advancement happening because of changes, revolutionary changes happening in science and technology. And because of that, now we have computers, and now we are talking about artificial intelligence. We talk about machine learnings. We talk about learning management systems. All those things are there, are brought into the school system, so which are facilitating our issues and helping us to make the things work very smoothly. So it is in that way you need to ensure that these factors are brought into meaningful actions, and using all of them we can make inclusiveness also to work in a better manner. So it is in that way the policy is directing us. Schools providing quality ECCE, early child care and education, reap the greatest dividends for children who come from families of SCDG. So that means that those who are there in the early child care education, they are likely to continue their education. Okay, there is no question of dropouts that happens if ECC in the same complex, the child is formally admitted to class 1 and is going to have the completion of his schooling up to class 2. So that is possible if school has ECCA also in its own complex or in its own building. So it is in that way they focus on how ECC is becoming as a dividend for formal schooling. Then, meanwhile, counselors and our well-trained social workers that work with and connect with schools and parents, teachers are also required. Okay. So that means here school cannot work on its own. Teachers cannot work in isolation. Everybody has to work in collaboration, and school, community, the counselors, resource teachers, everybody who is involved in educating the individual in the society and the community, all of them are to be looked at it. So it is in that perspective, the policy is highlighting that school must have community relationship. A sound community relationship must be built up. Only then you can able to address that SCDG issues in a more meaningful manner in that particular way. And the government has implemented that school community relationship by creation of school management committees, SMCs. Okay, so that is the platform through which community members and the school authorities are brought together, and they discuss the issues related to the education of their wards of the community. And they need to have their own wards equipped, educated with all necessary knowledge and skills. Okay, so it is in that way how things are to be done in inclusive setup by taking the help of these counselors, well-trained social workers, or like NGOs are working in the areas. There are volunteers who wants to come and serve you, help you. So all of them needs to be explored and brought into school, and in a collaborative manner, things need to happen. Then the 6.6, it talks about how things this point has emerged. Data shows that certain geographical areas contain significantly larger population of SC, STs and other things. And there are geographical locations that have identified as aspirational districts. So that is how operational districts have been listed out. So it is based on the population of SC or ST candidates or OBCs or minorities who are living in large pockets, in large numbers in those areas, geographical areas are taken, and their educational performance is also considered. Keeping those two things, these aspirational districts are identified, and they also want that group to be empowered with social justice and equality, and therefore they have been addressed in a more rigorous way and in a positive manner. So it is in that way the aspirational identification of aspirational districts has been considered. Now, once these aspirational districts are considered, the policy recommended that a region of the country with a large population from economically disadvantaged group should be declared as special education zones. Okay, for developing the industries, you may see that in many states they would have said that we have created SEZ corridors. Okay, special economic zone corridors where if you establish their industries, certain infrastructure facilities are given, some tax rebates are given, and incentives are given for them to start their factory or industries. So, in the similar way, the policy says that wherever if you find aspirational districts are more and these categories of social disadvantaged group people are more, in that area you declare special education zone and help the other organization to set up schools, so which cater to providing quality education to these kinds of group of people and empower them to come to the mainstreaming in a meaningful manner over a period of time. So therefore creation of special education zone is also envisaged in this policy, and now it is up to the state and the central government to see which are those areas they want to do, identify it, declare it, and accordingly try to bring in new educational institutions in that particular area which supports their higher education and other related activities. Okay, so that is the policy is talking about SCDG as well as SEZ, creation of SEZ also. Now, how is this SCDGs must also be there? They talk about it must be noted that women cut across all underrepresented groups. So that means here SCDG, when you are going to do, apart from all the social factors, economical factors you consider, you should also consider the gender factor, that is especially the female factor or the girl child education. And here in these cases, they emphasize that the women education must be given more importance and it should be addressed in a very meaningful manner. So it is in that way they say that. Unfortunately, the exclusion inequity the SDG face is only amplified in these SEDGs. So that means here the policy has reviewed the present situation and said that even they are there identified, but still they are not able to get the requisite facilities. Okay, the policy additionally recognizes that special and critical role that women play in society and in social mores and other factors are need to be looked into and they must be given importance. So quality education for girls is the best way to increase all these kinds of factors. Okay, so that means here in all educations and other social factors, so we have women reservation has come into picture. So now we know that Parliament has passed bill to give 33% reservations for women even in the parliamentary allocations also. So it is in that way women factor is considered in the earlier policies and even in this policy also, and even in the school education this must percolate, and we must see that girl child education is given much more importance and we need to enhance their educational activities. So it is in that way we are trying to look at. So it is to promote that the policy says that they are going to create a gender inclusion fund. Okay, the central government is going to create a fund and it will be labeled as gender inclusion fund to build the capacity of the women. Okay, and they need to provide equitable quality education for all girls as well as transgender students. So you cannot say that why women is given more importance here. So we know that Indian society is male dominated and females are already not given much more equal opportunity, though constitution says, but the social mental orientation of the people have not changed as policy legislation implement desires. So therefore they try to bring in that factor and say that we need to give privilege special provisions for girl education and transgender education. So this whatever fund they are going to create, they say that it will be made available to states. It is not only kept with the center, it will be given to state to implement priorities determined by the central government. Whatever is the priority area, the central government decides. If the state governments works in that prioritized areas, adequate funds will be released from the center, and with that, and we have to do the mandated activities as prescribed by the fund regulations. Okay, so it is in that they may give. So they are highlighting that what are the things that can be used for this now for providing bicycles, for providing sanitary pads, okay, and by constructing the toilets for the girls, okay, and then even transferring the cash to the students, conditional transfers, okay, or whichever is the things that we are going to look at it, which are exclusively created for promoting girls' education. If we are trying to do that, for doing such kind of specific activity also, this fund can be utilized. And this will also enable states to support and scale effective community-based interventions. So that means you can also use the community resources that is available with you, or even the local context specific barriers which are there towards the females that needs to be eradicated or elevated and try to bring them into the main fold of education. So it is that is the main purpose of this fund, and this fund will be used, and it is to be used only to ensure that girl child enrollment in school education at all level, all stages are increasing, and it is maintained in that particular fashions. So it is in that way the 6.8 talks about this particular activity. Now 6.9 talks about providing free boarding facilities will be built. Okay, free boarding facilities. So that means here building of hostels exclusively for the girl child on the lines of Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas, okay, which are located across the country. They are functioning in the rural sectors and they are catering to the rural talents that are there and try to provide them with the good educational atmosphere. In the same way, the government is also anticipating creating the hostel facilities for girl child who can come if there is any issues of their boarding or lodging at home or any other not able to get good quality access to education. So she can come travel to a center, get admitted to this and try to do that. Now, for promoting girls' education, we know that Kasturiba Gandhi Balika Vidyalayas are there and they are functioning from class 6 to class 10th in some states. In somewhere it has started from class 6 to 12. Some of them are functioning independently with their own buildings and hostel, inbuilt hostel and everything. Some are operating in a makeshift operating system. Some are staying in a hostel and admitting the child to a local nearby schools, government schools. Like these alternative measures are there for encouraging the girl child in the name of Kasturiba Gandhi Balika Vidyalayas. Now that needs to be strengthened, that everything needs to be streamlined. Only one single patrons are there. Now the education of the girl child up to grade 12 must be ensured even in the formal setup also. So wherever they require hostels, that will be created at the convenient places. So that is what this policy is hinting at. Then it also talks about not only state government doing it, the Navodaya Vidyalayas and Kendriya Vidyalayas are exclusively run by the central government, which are under the Ministry of Education. They are functioning as an autonomous body. They are exclusively created Kendriya Vidyalayas for the benefit of the central government employees, and Navodaya Vidyalayas are exclusively created to cater to the rural talents that are existing in the rural areas. And based on that, so Navodayas have a residential setup, Kendriya Vidyalayas have non-residential setup. So those two types of setups also should come in the special education zone areas also, which takes care of other disadvantaged group of children also. So it must be the states can think of creating on the same line or in a different manner. Now in Karnataka, they are having this, they are following the same KV pattern under the name Karnataka Public School System, where they start teaching the students from class 1 to class 12 in English medium. Okay, so like this, they are also trying to emulate the patterns of the central governments and try to put them into their own patterns and systems and ensure that every child is given access to education and are given a quality education in those areas. Okay, next it talks about preschool sections covering at least 1 year of early child care and education will be the part of Kendriya Vidyalayas and other primary schools around the nation, particularly in disadvantaged group districts. Okay, so now in KVs we have classes from only 1 to 12, but they don't have the early child care education. The policy says that at least 1 year of the early child education will be started, need to be started in KVs. And it can be extended even to the first 3 years of their schooling years also. So the gradual setup of these things can happen. Now, over a period of next immediate times, we can see KVs having 1 year of at least early child education system functioning within their premises. So it is in that way they are trying to look at it. So all primary schools across the country, they need to have at least 1 year of early child education happening within their school compound itself. It is in that way the policy is highlighting the essence of early child education as a continuum for learning. So it is in that way